Shut up!
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Conversations with Carol and Cheryl. And today, this is a special podcast because instead of Carol, we have Carol's daughter, Mary. How you doing, Mary?
I'm good. Hey, all you cool cats and kittens.
So I guess you all know what we're talking about today. Tiger King. Everybody, I think, is binge watching this show. And if they're not, they've had to have seen the reference on social media because some people think that this show alone is keeping us from rioting and staying sane. And
I think something that's cool about this show is that I don't think it would have the same kind of result in social media as it would if we weren't all in quarantine right now. I think that since the show is just so absurd, I don't think it's something maybe that everybody would watch. But since there's not as much to do right now, a lot of people have really gotten on that trend with the Tiger King.
I agree with that. I think you're right. Well, I think the other thing too is I just kept getting surprised as it went on. I was like, oh my God. Oh, this took a twist.
Right. I did feel like the show definitely was all over the place. You would kind of be into one story about one thing, and then something completely out of the blue would come into this whole Tiger World fiasco. You can't make it up.
Okay, so I guess what I'll do is I'm going to kind of give a brief rundown of the show for our listeners that haven't seen it. That was a real challenge because, like you said, it was all over the place. So I'm going to do the best I can without giving away too much, and then we can go ahead and talk about it. So Tiger King is about a guy referred to as Joe Exotic, and he runs a zoo in Oklahoma called GW Zoo. His zoo staff is run by misfits that are just grateful for a job. His nemesis is Carol Baskin and her husband Howard, who someone said they're 150% sure he keeps his socks on while they're having sex. I saw that. I thought that was funny. She was running it before she married this Howard, but together they run a big cat rescue. And that's what it's called, Big Cat Rescue. She really wants to bring down Joe Exotic and all the other big cat owners. She thinks they're mistreating them and making money, selling baby tigers for profit, and just all around she views them as bad guys. And Joe Exotic hates her with a passion. The other cat owners are also highlighted, and one of them is Doc Antle, who is a polygamist, and the other one is Tim Stark, another cat owner. During this show, this series, they have different people talking in confessionals, which is talking to the camera, giving their take on it. And one guy who is in the confessional is John Finley, who you end up finding out is married to Joe Exotic. Another main player is the reality producer, Rick Kirkman, who was originally hired to produce Joe's exotic internet TV shows. And this guy sees a gold mine and he starts filming reality TV show with Joe Exotic. And that show would have been called Tiger King. So that's where the title comes from, Tiger King. There's so many moving parts, like I said. So we have such things as like Carol's previous husband disappears. Someone loses a hand. There's a marriage between three people. There's drug addiction. There's country singing. Joe runs for a governor and president. There's a suicide. There's expired Walmart food. And I hate the term douchebag, but in this case, I honestly think it fits. Douchebag number one is Jeff Lowe, in my opinion. And douchebag number two is James Garrison. These are the cast of characters. And their probably worst decision they ever made, or maybe it is a positive, is that they filmed everything. That in itself is bizarre, that they would catch everything they caught on film. So where do we want to start, Mary?
Well, there's a couple things that I've seen since watching the Tiger King series that I think are really interesting. One of which was Kelsey, also Saf, the zookeeper that lost an arm in the tiger bit it off. And she was back in the zoo in about a week after going to the hospital, back working in like a couple of days. So I thought that was really crazy. But the thing that I saw was that I think this person actually identifies as male, and the show was receiving backlash because they weren't really portraying Saf as a male, which he goes by. So I thought that was
goes by a male.
The Saf, the one who lost the arm. They also say Kelsey, but apparently that person identifies as a male. But the show portrayed Saf as a female.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Why would they not, I guess, portray this person with the gender that they want to be portrayed? I think is just kind of weird.
They could not have been offended.
Right. The other question I had, I guess this is kind of detailed, but in one of the episodes, maybe I want to say episode 3, the whole studio was blown up where the crocodiles and alligators were kept also. And it's rumored that Joe Exotic is the one that blew it up. And I just thought that the producer was really upset because all of the footage was gone. And that was a whole part of the show. But then how do they have all of this footage from before that happened if it was all blown up by Joe Exotic?
Well, I think even before the producer came around, Joe filmed everything.
Maybe all of the producers' footage, but not all of Joe's footage.
You know, that's who I feel the most sorry for in this whole thing, is that producer. He had a gold mine. He would have been so rich if this became a reality show. And I just feel so bad for him.
The other thing that I saw some articles about that I thought was interesting is how they didn't really use the term bisexual at all in the show. They were saying how Joe's 2 husbands weren't really gay, how one of them was hooking up with women throughout the park, and that he wasn't really gay. But they could have just said he was bisexual or something like that. Like, they never really acknowledged that could be an option. It was just that, like, these people are gay or they're not gay.
I took that part as that they were so dependent on him for drugs. They were probably 100% straight, but stayed with him for the drugs, do you think? I mean, I can see maybe doing something here and there for drugs, you know?
I just don't think they were 100% straight. I think maybe they were more straight than they were gay, but they were still kind of gay. So it was also with doing the drugs, it worked out for them. You know, they were completely straight. I don't think they would do that solely for the drugs, but maybe if they were a little bit gay too, then it was.
I agree with that because they really compromised themselves when they got married. I guess we should say that they had a threesome marriage where Joe Exotic married 2 young men. I mean, I don't think you go through with that. Lock yourself in.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you're bisexual.
That's what I'm saying. But the show didn't really acknowledge that they could be bisexual. It was just they're not gay is what the show would say about them. Interestingly enough, John Finley had his teeth fixed, but the show never showed him with his full new set of beautiful teeth, which I think is interesting too, that they wanted to portray John Finley as a redneck, you know, and how the producers decided to spin certain things and what they decided to leave out is interesting.
Well, I know I was talking with my daughter about the show. We were talking about just how a camera angle can make somebody look crazy or guilty. They made that Carol Baskin riding that bike with that face, you know, that expression. But like the 3rd or 4th shot of that, I was like, this lady's nuts.
So do you think that Carol Baskin killed her husband?
Yes.
And fed him to the tigers?
Yes.
I think the show can kind of give details how it wants to lead the viewers to certain conclusions about it. But I think from just based on the show, she changed the will in case of disappearance or death, which is like very unusual to be in a will. And then on day one of year 5 of him being missing, she declared him dead, which is the earliest time you could legally declare someone dead after they've been missing for that period of time. So I think that's interesting that right on that day, she went and declared him dead to get his money too.
And her brother worked for the same police department in the same county, so.
And then I feel like the role that her husband's first family kind of played in the show, talking about it too, they said that they think that she did it, which I think is telling too. But obviously they probably aren't a big fan of her if she took their dad away from their mom and stuff like that. You have to consider, I think.
They reopened the investigation.
I saw that. I think with everything happening now as the show is blowing up, people really want more answers with that scandal.
I thought she was going to be doing interviews. The more interviews that she does, she's going to cast a net and catch herself, because she's going to use the wrong tense, like he was dead before he really was dead.
Oh, yeah.
Even without the interviews, they're going to go ahead and reopen it. How
do you feel on the fundamental issue that is kind of brought up by Carol Baskin? How do you feel about the cub petting or just overbreeding these tigers for money? Because it seems like a lot of people in the media are on Joe Exotic's side just because I think of the character that he plays, but I think there is still a moral issue with maybe what he was doing.
Well, first of all, I think she's a hypocrite. I think she was doing the exact same thing.
Except she wasn't having people pet the cubs, but she had them in the cages. It's not like she was bringing them to India or something to roam free or anything like that. She was putting them in a cage as well.
Yeah, I don't understand why she just didn't set them free. Ship them and set them free. I think what he was doing, at first I thought he was good to the animals, but as time went on, I could see that he really wasn't as good to the animals as I thought he should be, or that I thought he was. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with those kind of things as long as you treat them right and then maybe let them go after a certain time. But then sometimes they can't take care of themselves. Certain animals can't take care of themselves when they're domesticated. So, but I think there's a way for a happy medium for the kids to see them, because they are really beautiful animals. And so I think there's a nice way to do it, but it's not my thing. And I wouldn't go see one. It's just not for me. But if it's done right and then they're released and they can keep them mating, I think that would be a good thing. I don't think Carol or Joe Exotic were doing any good.
And I think that something the producer said towards the end of the show was how it was really hard for him to have to film Joe as if he loved all these animals, knowing that love for them escaped him over time as he just got more into himself. And I think it's clear that Joe's priorities were more on Joe than they were on the tigers. So I think some of Carol's argument was maybe valid in that way. I mean, he did also kill 5 of the tigers, which isn't right. Someone that portrays himself as so in love with these tigers to kill 5 of them, or maybe even kill all the crocodiles while blowing up the studio, can tell doesn't really care so much about them.
I was thinking, why are these cat owners so weird? And then I started thinking, maybe it's because they feel they can control these huge animals and overpower them. That if they can do that to these huge animals, maybe they can do it to other humans, and it makes them superior. What do you think that tiger ownership does to these people? Because that one guy, aka Tony Montana, sold drugs. It was the opposite, so he can maintain his cat habit.
I think what you said about how maybe translates to their view on humans is a really valid point, because when you look at Doc Antle and how he had all of those younger women staying for decades at his place, working so hard in poor conditions, getting boob jobs, changing their names, doing all of that, I think he got off more on that than he did on the tigers. But I think the tigers are what gave him the confidence to do that. Hearing the one woman's story that was interviewed, she had left the Doc Antle cult. I thought her perspective was really interesting. I just thought it was crazy how she said, I was 17 and convinced my dad to drive me there. I'm just thinking, like, who lets their 17-year-old go live on a tiger farm with somebody that has however many wives? You know, that just seems interesting that all these girls find that as an option, maybe.
And the dad obviously knew something was up when he said, don't fall in love with your boss. Who says that? Unless you have some kind of weird inkling, you know?
He seemed to be like a little bit more socially aware than Joe. You know, he didn't face as many issues with Carol. He was also saying he spends a lot more money on the food for the tigers. He was really smart about, but I just think he is almost weirder than Joe Exotic is.
I think so too, because I think he was actually more aware of what he was doing because he had like two personalities. He saw when the camera was rolling, he would be like, you know, here at our zoo, we treat the animals with love and respect. And then, is that good enough? Did you guys get that? So he was definitely portraying this completely different person. He was aware of what he was doing.
And that's where I think he was smart, you know, in dealing with people like Carol Baskin. He kind of covered some of his ground there by portraying himself a little bit smarter, having that PhD, which I think was in something like mystical creatures or something. It's really funny. I don't know if you've seen the photo of when Britney Spears did that famous performance with the live snake. There's a photo of Doc Antle in the background with a tiger because he was the one that brought the animals for Britney Spears' show way back when.
He was the one that brought them?
Yeah. And then the other thing I think is kind of interesting is like thinking about how Joe is so exotic as a person and then thinking back to his early life and maybe things that would have contributed to his personality later on. He really struggled with being gay, especially in the area of Oklahoma that he was in and how his father responded to it. And I think a lot of that led to him always wanting to seek approval or find something that was his niche or like some place he felt comfortable and where he was accepted. And I think he made that at the zoo.
I think what a shame is he had a beautiful singing voice.
You think?
Oh, yeah, I think he was good. I mean, beautiful is probably the wrong word, but he definitely sounded, I think, just like any other country star. I don't think he was bad. He had the personality where he would have really stood out with the voice and the personality. I mean, he could have definitely made something of himself, I think, that way.
So what do you think were his major faults? Because clearly he did have such a character personality. The producer said he was like a mythical creature himself, just how like a cartoon almost, how his actual personality was. So where do you think he fell through with everything? Do you think it was his greed getting the best of him or just issues running the zoo? I mean, what kind of prevented him from being the star that he had the potential to be?
I think his hatred for Carol Baskin.
He spent too much time dealing with her.
He was obsessed with her. He should have just let it roll off his shoulders and carry on with his life. Just ignore her. People know who she is now because of him. And his hatred just consumed him. And I think that was his biggest downfall.
The money that Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin spent fighting each other went towards a better enclosure for these animals or higher quality food. I think that would have really, at least for the whole mission that Carol Baskin portrays, for what she wants to do and says she wants to save these tigers, I think if she put the thousands of dollars that she spent fighting Joe Exotic towards that, she would have been fulfilling her mission a lot more than trying to take down him. So I think it's ironic at the end of the day how they really just nobody won. And especially the Tigers took, I think, the biggest loss there.
And poor Joe's parents lost, giving him all this money. I mean, I think, honestly, too, I think Carol Baskin is really awful because she knew what she was doing to this guy. She was driving him over the edge. She should have just say her piece and then move on, because she was doing the same thing. She had millions of dollars from her husband that people think she fed to the big cats. She had the money to do them in, and she did it.
I think that you kind of look at Carol Baskin throughout the show and you just kind of think, who hurt you? Who was it that made her so angry almost at the world, And she said that she didn't have friends and that she really related to the cats because she didn't have human friends. What made her that way,
Yeah, I don't know. I also heard that Joe Exotic, what contributed to make him the way he was is that he was apparently raped at 5. And it's crazy how a parent can just cut to the core, like what his dad said, made him shake on it, not to attend his funeral. I just wonder, did the dad know how scarred he made that kid at that time?
And I think, too, something that I've been wondering is it seems like a lot of the footage came from Joe and maybe some from the producer as well. So who is the beneficiary of making this film? Is it the Netflix? Because seems like Joe Exotic had done all the work, because it's probably not the producer or just the people that were interviewed.
That's a good question. I hope the producer brought it to Netflix attention, but I guess the court case probably did. But I really hope that producer benefited somehow, some way.
So do you think that the murder for her hire was legit? If the guy never got the call from, I forget who called him when he was on his way, do you think it would have happened? Talking about it, he'll just say, oh, I was on my way and I guess it didn't happen. But if you guess it didn't, you were the one that decided not to. Or he's talking about it as if he wasn't involved.
The sad thing is he gave him money with the intent for that guy to kill her. Just because it didn't go through.
I think as much as Carol Baskin is portrayed as a terrible person and as much as they make Joe seem to be a really good person, I still think at the end of the day, it's really wrong to try to hire somebody to go kill your enemy. I mean, I think people are almost looking past that fact in social media, or a really bad thing, even though it didn't happen. It seems like people are looking past the fact that he did that and also killed 5 tigers.
But I think in that world, considering she probably killed her husband and he went to jail, somehow or another, I found him a likable guy. I mean, he was a bad guy.
He's very charismatic.
Yes.
And you could tell, I think he had a soft heart.
Yeah, because he kept those young guys around him, apparently for the drugs, but he also bought them cars. And
the one character I really liked was Travis. I just thought he was so cute. They were explaining how he was 6'6" or something, and I could see like Joe in his little world at the zoo and then seeing this guy and being really into it. But I just wonder again, like Travis, I think was 19, visiting from California, when like a straight boy tells his parents, oh, I'm actually going to be moving into a tiger zoo and I'm getting married to a man. I know the mom was interviewed, but I just think that's so crazy. How were these people reacting when this was happening? Like family members.
Yeah, but then his mom, did you see her at the funeral? And also, apparently she worked there. I didn't realize that she worked there.
I thought that she came in for the funeral and then also came in for Joe's next wedding that happened after Travis died.
That's what I thought, but someone said that she worked at the zoo. How does a parent react to that? The mom looked like she was on drugs. That was kind of sad. And yeah, how do you tell your mom, I'm marrying men? I'm marrying
2 other guys. Yeah.
2 guys.
Travis didn't really have any drama around him. He was just always portrayed in the film just being a goofball. It seems like that was a real, genuine, tragic thing that happened. That's not negotiable like other parts of the Tiger King. Like that was a really bad tragedy that happened throughout the show that you can't really argue, you know? Just like a really good person.
Yeah, I agree. I can't believe they caught that on video.
Of him shooting himself?
But for the listeners, he wasn't on camera when he did it, but the guy that he did it in front of
was on the security camera. Yeah, and I thought that was crazy.
Now, do you think it was intentional, or was he playing with the gun?
Just from what the show explained, it seems like it was really unintentional. I guess he was pointing it at the guy that was Joe's campaign manager that also worked at the Walmart. He had said, for the 10th time, Travis, stop pointing the gun at me, because I guess this happens all the time. And then Travis was like, oh, no, don't worry. Look, it's not going to shoot. And then it did, is what happened. But I don't know. I mean, they could have spun it that way. It didn't seem from his character that he was really upset with his situation or anything.
He couldn't leave the property. He couldn't do anything or go anywhere. Starting to get really, really unhappy.
Maybe it was then.
I'm not sure, but that poor guy that sat there and watched it. And I don't get this. The campaign manager, it seemed like he stayed on after the campaign.
He did. Yeah. I thought it was really cute when he said, you know, I had known Joe Exotic because he would come to the Walmart and take the expired meat. And when Joe Exotic asked me to be his campaign manager, I was just so happy because that's been my dream job. Of course, I'll be your campaign manager. And it's kind of cute that he was just so excited about that position for Joe that he quit the Walmart gig. It seems like other people at the zoo, they got really comfortable there and either didn't have the means to leave, weren't allowed to leave, or just liked it. I think he was one of those, just like other people that have been there for so many years.
It was really sad to see how the end of the zoo affected the staff. I mean, they were really lost without it. I mean, it gave them, even though they didn't like some of the stuff that was going on there, like the one guy with the blonde hair, I can't think of his name right now.
I loved him. He reminds me of Shaggy from...
Yeah, it was sad at the end. He looked like he was wasted. But he said he had nothing going for him. And he goes, now I'm putting on tiger shows at a zoo. How great is that?
I think that's something that the feud between Carol and Joe, it was really insensitive to how many people are actually involved, how many people really were able to maybe turn their lives around or at least make a life for themselves that they were really excited about. And was she aware of all the damage she was doing on that front? Or if she just didn't care?
Because the employee that lost the hand, they came back to work so that there wasn't so much hoopla about it. And they could have had the hand reconstructed over 2 years. He had really dedicated, loyal staff.
And it's interesting because although he paid his employees versus Carol, who just had the volunteers, I mean, Joe's employees were basically volunteers, I felt like. I think it is pretty telling at how it seemed like it was a lot more of a family at Joe's zoo versus Carol's rescue. It was just a bunch of volunteers. She didn't even know who they were. She was like, oh, well, if they've been here 5 years, then I'll recognize their face. But yeah. It seemed like Joe really created a family, whereas she just kind of had maybe some brainwashed volunteers.
You asked me a question about what I think made Carol the way she is. And it sounded like she had a rough start, like a young girl with the marriage. A guy was beating her or something, and she had to walk alongside the road.
So didn't she have a previous marriage? And I think she married him when she was 16 or 17. And then I think she left him or something. And you're right, she was just walking along the road. And that's when her husband, I guess, stopped to approach her. But the thing is that I wonder about, being a young female, how many millionaires just pick up girls off the side of the road
I mean, I wonder if anyone has collaborated her story, if it's true or if that's her rendition.
It seems like his previous family didn't really have too much knowledge on it, but I mean, why would his kids know the exact story of how he met his mistress?
Was she walking the street or was she really walking away from her husband? I mean, it could have been some
Yeah.
John that beat her up and she said, my husband. I mean, it's just weird if that's factual.
I just think there are so many parts of the crazy story that you ask yourself, there's no way that that would have all happened the exact way that it was portrayed in the show. Something funny I saw was Cardi B posted on Twitter, I think, that it was unacceptable that Joe Exotic was in jail still, and she was going to start a GoFundMe, but it's in the GoFundMe guidelines that you can't use that service to raise money to get somebody off a crime or to pay for lawyer fees. And then she wrote another tweet saying that she was just kidding, but for real, she loves Joe Exotic. And then I guess there's the other player and everything. Was his name?
Oh, Jeff Lowe.
Jeff Lowe, yeah.
Yes. Ugh, I could not stand him.
I didn't like him and his wife, Lauren. You could just tell they were up to something.
I just thought he was just so, that whole way he dressed and with the baby tigers, trying to get women around him with it. And he was just such a tool to me. I just could not stand him.
I think in a way you could tell how him and Joe were just like both a little bit off the deep end. And you could tell how at first you could see those two characters really getting along. But then how, I guess, just the politics of the zoo, having both of them as the leaders, and obviously Joe still thought this is his kingdom. I think that was destined to fall apart.
Yeah, and I knew it would fall apart with the new guy. Other guy he went into business with where they started rebuilding another zoo. Crazy. I'm like, that's not going to last. This guy is a shyster.
Well, and that's what they said. They said when he runs out of cons, he starts taking people's money and then he'll go do another con.
I did not like him. He's the one I called douchebag number one in the beginning, but I guess it's a better word. I don't know. Also, so does the other little squirrely dude that
was involved in the whole police thing.
Yeah.
The major player in that.
Did you see where he called him the Chucky doll, fat Chucky doll?
No, I didn't see that.
He looked exactly like Chucky.
What I didn't understand was, in the world of criminals, they prefer to not talk to the police. That's like a big thing. Don't talk to the police. So what I don't understand is that guy who seemed to have some criminal background didn't seem to have any incentive to go to the police about the whole murder for hire. I just don't understand what the motivation was for him even doing that. Why did anyone go to the police in the first place? I mean, his reasoning, I believe, was just that he felt like this was something he should stop because he knows about it. But what about your other crimes? You didn't feel the same moral compass at that point?
Yeah, I guess once he could tell on somebody else to save himself, he did it. But I think there was a reason. It almost seemed like he did it for the heck of it. I didn't like him because he called Jeff Lowe, told him to do it.
Something I found it's a little funny when I think it was the prosecutor, the woman, she had the shorter hair and she was talking about the situation. I just thought it was so funny how being like a government official, she had to talk about this whole scenario in a very formal way. I'm just sitting there thinking, woman, you don't know the half of what's really going on at that zoo. And she's talking about it in very legal terms about what's going on. I thought that was kind of funny. She just seemed so ignorant to the whole actual Tiger King, what was going on.
I thought it was kind of dirty pool that they would throw those charges in on killing the animal with the murder for hire to bring more attention to it with the animal people. And, I just think it's wrong.
I was going to say, I thought it was super interesting how by the end, everybody at the zoo testified against Joe. I thought that was really sad. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of those people were already criminals, so it was probably pretty easy maybe for the police to convince them to testify. Maybe they had some other dirt on them or something like that. I'm sure they could pull something together to convince them to testify, to save themselves in some way.
Who knew what they had on film with them? You know what I mean? Like, it was in their best interest just to tell the truth because they
Oh,
filmed
yeah.
so much. I mean, that would be me like, Jesus, what did they film? I have no idea what I'm on film.
Yeah. And I'm sure when they were filming all of that stuff, they never thought it would be seized by the police at some point. I'm trying to put together all of the different angles that you have working with the story. You have Joe Exotic doing his thing, and then you have Carol fighting him. But Carol also said that Joe is just one of the major people that she fought with. So seems like she was doing some other stuff besides fighting with Joe. But then you have Doc Antle and his whole thing going on where his relationship with Joe is interesting because Joe is saying how he idolizes this person. They've really worked together a lot. And then Doc Antle is like, yeah, Joe is just a freak.
Right.
So it's just like really crazy having all of these working parts. I don't think the show was really put together that well. It didn't really have a beginning, middle, end. The content was so crazy that it didn't really matter how they threw all the information together.
Right. And like you said, during this time, it's definitely a distraction. Do you think they should let him go?
I just don't think that he was really doing, if you look at people who are in jail or in prison for 22 years, I mean, I think it's a lot worse than like the things that Joe Exotic done. He just doesn't seem to be like a hardcore criminal. But at the same time, I mean, if Carol Baskin was murdered, then I would say he for sure needs to be in jail. But who knows like how serious he really was about that.
I almost kind of think he should get out because one thing is she was never scared for her life. If I was her, he had been outside my big cat rescue taking photos and things like that. I mean, he did all those threatening things online, but she'd still take those bicycle rides. I would have stayed in. And I think she knew she was poking the bear. I don't know if he should get free. I don't think he should get that long.
I think once you finish the show, you feel like you almost have a personal relationship with Joe Exotic. So it's almost like asking someone like, well, do you think your mom should go to jail for that? I mean, almost where you feel so connected with Joe Exotic that first you think about his character and just how he's goofy and funny and seems to have a pretty good heart. That's, I think, where your mind goes first with him, not, well, he did almost have somebody killed. I think it's interesting. I guess it would depend who you ask, but I'm not sure how long he's been in jail for, but I think 22 years is a little bit excessive, given that nothing happened to Carol Baskin. Didn't seem like it was really that legit with the guy that was going down.
Yeah, you're getting information from like a bunch of seedy characters that are in it just almost for entertainment, just to lie, it seems like. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know that they were like that, but it seems like they just were not accountable people to me or responsible or honest or anything like that. So 22 years is a long time for something that never happened. I mean, maybe a few years.
I mean, I just think that there was an issue with how he was handling the tigers too, but I just don't know, is that really like a punishable by being incarcerated type of thing? I think if somebody like steals something and goes to jail, then maybe they can be rehabilitated. But for somebody that had hundreds of tigers, are they going to leave jail a new person? Like, oh, that was wrong. Because it is ironic how Joe ended up in a cage. I just don't think it's really that severe to be in jail for 22 years.
I agree. Talking about how ironic that he ended up in a cage. Someone had said to me about this whole quarantine is like now we are in the cages.
So it started with the tigers and now Joe Exotic is encaged. and then it leads to all of us being caged in quarantine.
He said he shot those animals because they were sick. But the one guy, your favorite guy, the long hair, I can't remember his name, he seemed to think that it wasn't necessary. Because remember he said he had to look them in the eye. They trusted him. I know when I put my dog down, I felt the same way. I always assured him when I went to the vet that he was fine. So even though he was sick and I had to put him down, I felt like a betrayal there. Like he had no idea. So was it that, or did Joe really kill them because they were suffering? Or
Well, the one thing that I kind of wonder is, I don't think Joe is really smart where he's studied these tigers and how to really like deal with their body language and things like that. So I just wonder if he was working with them for that long with that many of them, why did he never lose a hand? And it was shown where one of them, I think, was kind of not like attacking him, but kind of being rough with him. And he did shoot his gun. So I wonder maybe that they were going to attack him and he shot them to save himself, because it just seems like he was in the business so long to never have been attacked by one or thing like that. So that's where would I wonder with the 5 tigers, if they were sick or if he was in danger and then shot them.
Because as many years as he ran that place, 5 is not a lot.
Maybe the reason he never had any injuries is because he was primarily dealing with the cubs.
Remember at the end of the show, they said that Doc Antle was charged?
He was charged?
They said at the end of the show that charges were pending on Doc Antle, but I have not heard any more about that.
Do you remember how Joe was trying to just get back at people that hurt him in his business? So he was turning on Doc Antle and big players like that, saying, I can give you records of when I sold them tigers or when they bought them or sold them to me. Could have been because of Joe just retaliating on the tiger world.
That's exactly what it was. Now that you say that, because of what he turned over, you're right. That's where the charges came from. I wonder if he and his third husband are still married.
Oh, Dylan Passage?
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was interesting. They met on a dating app. Or how many people do you think would have right swiped on Joe Exotic? That's what I was thinking. If you're on Tinder or something and you see Joe Exotic, but this is when he was just a character, who is thinking like, yes, that is who I should go on a date with?
So I never thought of it like that. Maybe Joe swiped on him. I don't know how that worked, but maybe Joe swiped on him.
Maybe. The other thing I read somewhere was that a younger boy had said to Joe years ago, thanks for being the only gay man around here. Or, thanks for what you've done. That kid grew up to be the campaign manager. I read that somewhere. I don't know if that's true, but I think that's interesting. It seems like Joe and the campaign manager always had a little thing going on.
Wow. Yeah, because I just thought it was really weird how he stuck around. I was like, you'd think he would be like, my job's done here, goodbye.
I think he'd be like running for the hills after everything.
Yeah.
That he stuck around. He still had an office and everything. Let me ask you this. If Joe Exotic was running for governor in your town, in your area, would you have voted for him?
Hell no.
He was third in the race at one point in his area. I thought that was so crazy. I would understand him thinking, oh, if I run for president or for governor, then that will bring more publicity to me and maybe my show and my zoo. But it seems like that was kind of his mindset in the beginning. And then after that, it turned to he actually really thought he had a shot at it. Well, and then there was even the footage of, I think it was whoever won the election came up to him and very seriously said, good race.
Well, I think he is petitioning to get out or appealing. So it will be interesting to see what happens with the backing of people that are supporting him.
I think that the show makes me pretty happy looking at how many people got the short end of the stick, saying the producer and maybe Joe got a little bit too harsh of a punishment. And for these people before the show, that was kind of it. That was their situation and that's what happened. But now I think the show brings a lot of potential for those people to rebuild their lives back based on everything that fell apart or investments they made in this financially or just with their time in their life. So I think that's something that's really good about the show, is hopefully it'll bring good things to those people that thought they had no other options at this point.
That's nice. And I hope so too. That would be great because now they're a little bit famous. So
that's why I was wondering earlier, who is going to really benefit the most. I wonder if these people are going to get any money for really being on the show, or maybe for future interviews with other news sites, or they'll get money for it at least. But I just think they deserve it more than some Netflix producers who put it together when it was already filmed. But another question I have for you, what do you think Joe Exotic's reaction was in jail when Netflix or whoever came to him and said, we want to make a whole popular series? I think what is happening now for Joe Exotic is what he's always wanted throughout his whole life.
Yeah, I think he's excited about it. I probably think he is like a celebrity now in jail. I think it's brought light to him and he has a little more of a voice now and there, and people are going to follow it. All these people have been watching it. If he doesn't appeal, I think I'm in. I want to see what happens. Yeah.
You could ask Joe Exotic one thing. What would you ask him?
Is he over Carol Baskin? What would you ask?
I would want to know how it worked with the three dudes. Everybody wondered that at some point.
I cannot believe the guy talking about gay, straight, or bisexual. I'm with you on that. Now, the idea that guy tattooed
private property owned by Joe Exotic.
You are bisexual, my friend.
But they never just simply offered that he could just be bisexual. I
want to know what the hell the girl was thinking that got pregnant by him.
By John Finley?
I mean, you're getting pregnant by a guy that was in a marriage with two other guys?
So I wondered about that. Do you think John Finley was hitting on the girls in the park? Or do you think they were hitting on him? This guy is married to your boss who's a guy, and you think, to your knowledge, he's just gay. I don't think you would try to come on to him. Yeah,
I think they were all in probably if he gave him the green light, but I think he must have had to initiate it. And they must have had an inkling of him before they got married, because it was a tight-knit family. So he was sleeping around, I think, before he even got married, probably telling them, I'm getting married. I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to get my truck. I'm going to get, maybe even thought he was going to get a piece of the zoo. Who knows?
I thought it was really cute when they actually did put the zoo in John's name, and they were doing the video recording for maybe commercial or something. John just could not do the, hi, this is the GW Zoo. He couldn't do it for the camera. I thought that was so cute.
You can't make that stuff up.
I think something that a lot of the listeners should keep in mind is if you're really stressed out about something, just know there's places like the GW Zoo in America right now, with people like Joe Exotic running around. As we're talking about it, there's that craziness happening in just the middle of nowhere somewhere.
That's so true.
That's a good takeaway from the show.
Definitely. And if I had a takeaway, I would say, don't ever let anyone get to you so badly you destroy your own life. Just move on, ignore them, do your thing, or say your positives. And
I think that's kind of what we were saying, how everyone is passionate about the cats, but they were the ones who really took the biggest loss from everything that was going on. When they entered the tiger world, they were all really passionate about it. And then, like you said, being so involved in each other, it really took them away from something they were passionate about permanently, or for a really long time at least. So I think that is a good lesson from the show.
Do you have any more questions? Or
no, I think that's everything I can think of. Talk about Tiger King for another 10 hours, honestly, but
I was mesmerized with it, and I was hooked immediately. What'd you think, Carol?
I think you guys did an extensive analysis of The Tiger King. I would like to thank Mary for coming on and remind our listeners to please like our Conversations with Carol and Cheryl Facebook page, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. Thanks, everybody.